Here we go. Wade, is this episode 3?
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. Welcome to the Soman Podcast, episode 3, where we are allowing you a little glimpse into the conversations we would have had anyway. Is that better than the first two?
It's getting better.
It's getting better. We'll work on it.
I think we're working on it.
We're doing better. So my name is Matthew Brozick. I have Wade H. Avid II. Did I get that right? The whole thing?
Deuce, number 2.
And we have our third guest, very distinguished. We were talking for at least the last, seems like half hour, about how distinguished all of the everything is. But so I have, it's Robert J., right?
Correct.
Yeah, Robert J. Miller, which little did you know when I was looking you up to Google you to try to figure out how smart you are, because you're actually a lot smarter than I gave you credit for the first time we ever spent time in a boat together. But there was a Medal of Honor recipient that passed away in 2008 that has the same name as you. And
yes,
so
he's much more distinguished than I am.
Yes. And so that was very interesting to learn. But we wanted to talk to you today because we have just your background and a little bit of the career that you had and the things that you've done. And like you had said before, you have a lot of life experiences. And I think that just from our conversations, that'd be good for us to talk about. So I guess where's the first kind of spot we want to start, or where do we want to go for the first bullet point?
Yeah, so for me, it's Robert, but do you prefer Bob?
Bob's fine.
Okay. So I just want to start with Bob.
I'll answer to any number of things.
Yeah, it's like kind of the whole, call me anything, but don't call me late for dinner.
Works.
So just some background on where you're from, education, all that kind of stuff. Are you Ph.D., retired? What are you doing now? Just give us, 5 minutes of Bob.
All right. I was born, I was raised in Quasquinton, Iowa, which probably nobody's ever heard of. Small town in eastern Iowa.
Is that between that place and Hell, like Mississippi River and
the
Hell?
Mississippi River and Hell.
Gotcha.
Yes,
Okay.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
It's a small rural community of about 500 people. I went to a consolidated school system. Was raised in a rural environment, quite rural, dairy farm in the 1950s and 60s. My phone, when I was, tell you how rural this was. My phone, when I was 14 years old, was a long, 2 shorts, and a long.
Yeah.
That was my phone number. Party line. You'd often get on the phone and tell people to get off because you couldn't hear the person on the other.
Yeah.
It was like having a tin can
Yeah.
on 2 ends. The more people you get on the tin can trying to listen, the harder it is to hear anything.
Yeah.
So that was, we had my grandparents that I lived with till off and on till I was through 8th grade. Had outdoor plumbing until about 1964.
Okay.
This is an interesting idea. We had my grandparents and parents raised most of their own meat and milk and made their own cheese. In the 1960s, we would separate the cream from the milk. We'd use the cream for our cereal, and we would give the 2% to the hogs.
Yeah, because the cream is the best.
And the rest of it wasn't worth having.
Yeah.
So it tells you a little bit about where we were at that time. So that's where I was raised. I graduated in 1968. Went to Northern Iowa, then to the University of Iowa, and received a Ph.D.
Well, hold on for a second now. There's a story here.
Yeah.
How'd you work your way through college?
Well, I was a rock and roll musician.
Yeah. Yeah.
Naturally.
In the 1960s and early 70s.
So what was the name of the band again?
Headstone.
Headstone. Okay.
Yeah, and
This is a great name.
it is a great name. I named the band actually, but I'm a member of the Iowa Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, so that's kind of a cool thing. Found that out
Tell
recently.
that story, how you found that out.
Well, when
your wife told me that story.
When I retired from the university in 2012, I think. My wife was doing a party for me, a small party, along with many of my colleagues. So she created a test for my colleagues to find out how much they knew about me.
Okay.
And she one of the questions was what rock and roll band did RJ play in? And well, the answer was there were about 6 or 7 of them, but the one that was most renowned was Headstone, and everybody was working on their phones, of course, looking for clues. They checked on the phone and found out that I was a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Iowa that I didn't even know. I didn't even know I was in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Not a huge deal, but a fun thing if you lived through those days and were a rock musician in the 60s. I did okay doing that. I was able to make a living while working my way through college. So it was a great lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely.
So-
I think that's such a unique thing to
What did
say
you?
did.
What instrument or sing? What did you
Just
do
second.
in the band?
Singer.
Singer. So you
Duh,
sang.
he's a front man.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're
Just look at
front
him.
man. Got it. Okay. And so, what kind of rock and roll music did you play during that era? Because you kind of had a wide range of doing, if you're going to do pop music or rock music or
Progressive rock in the 68, moving into
Yep.
more of a country rock by the
Yeah.
mid 70s or
Okay.
the early 70s. So we kind of evolved as the music evolved, and it was great. Wonderful people I played with. 2 of them finished their careers as musicians.
okay.
One played until he was in his mid 60s, a guitarist, and the other owned a very fine. Tom Datman owned a very fine music studio in Iowa, in Cedar Falls, Iowa,
Okay.
and continued to be a producer. I think he had a platinum record that he produced down there. So,
Wow.
remarkable guys. The other members were great musicians too.
So any influences back then or contemporaries that still stand out to you? Because I think about that era, and I basically don't buy any records that didn't come out before like GNR Appetite for Destruction. So like I basically go backwards,
Right.
From like 1985 back.
You know,
is
you'd
it-
find my son interesting. He's 27 years old, and he only listens to 60s through 75 music.
That's pretty much where I'm at. So
Yeah.
I'm like, were you? Was it more like that kind of Crosby, Stills, Nash thing, or was it a Cash, Haggard, Waylon Jennings thing, or because there's a whole
more
influence
Crosby,
of that.
Stills, and Nash,
Okay.
Poco, kind of the Eagles before the Eagles.
Yeah, before they sucked.
Yeah, before they became the Eagles.
Right.
So went back when they were pretty good. Crosby, Stills, and Nash. A lot of country rock influenced stuff,
Yeah.
which was really great stuff back in the early 70s.
Yeah, I think now it's like called like outlaw country or something like that. But like when I go back, I listen to those records. I don't hear anything coming out now. Certainly from the Nashville sound, maybe like Jason Isbell and that whole thing is happening. But prior to that, that's about as good as it got.
You know, the interesting thing about country today is the best guitarists now are pretty much country.
Pretty much, yeah.
Because most rock and roll doesn't use country, or doesn't use a guitar anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, it's awful. What's happened to music, that's my opinion, folks. I'm sorry.
Well, you
So
talk
what's
about
the-
Jason Isbell. He's
Yeah.
I love listening to his stuff, man. He's amazing. His
So-
songwriting's unbelievable, and he's an amazing guitarist as well.
And he was more of a rhythm guitarist, great songwriter. He was like the resident musician down in Nashville, somewhere for a year. Who's the guy that's married to Nicole Kidman, or was? He's an Australian guy, Keith Urban.
Keith Urban, thank
Yes,
you. Yeah.
yes.
So that guy can shred, and he's a really good guitar player, but he cut his teeth making country music.
Yeah.
And so you have all these musicians coming in there and doing this. And I play guitar very poorly, and I love music. So to hear anybody give some perspective on what it was back then, like compared to now, pop country or the more progressive kind of mainstream country music doesn't even sound the same to me at all.
You know, I'll tell you this, that in the 60s, mid to late 60s, I think the biggest stars in the world were not athletes. They were rock and roll musicians.
Yeah, right.
Which I think is an interesting thing. We've evolved into athletes now being
Yeah.
the center of pop culture. But back in the 60s and early 70s, it was musicians.
Yeah, it still is. And so you go to school, you're paying down debt, you're singing, making music. So how did you go from making music to getting into academia and full tenure, all that stuff?
Well, I decided that I wasn't good enough. I won't talk about the others, but I wasn't good enough to be a star in music. It wasn't going to happen for me. I was good, but not that good.
Yeah.
So I decided I wanted to be a college professor. So I quit the band, played on weekends with other bands, so I continued to make some money, and it was fun. But decided to go back to school and get a degree in something that would get me into a profession. In 1977, I started in special education. I started to get educated as a special education teacher.
So
I had a degree in history.
So, like, how old are you at this time roughly?
Okay, I got a degree in
20s or-
history for 4.5 years, so I was 73. In 73, I had a degree in history. Couldn't get a job on the face of the earth as a teacher, and I wanted to teach.
So you're like 25 or you're 30 or?
I'm 27.
Okay.
Decided to go back and be I owned some rock and roll bars in that interim there for a while. So then I went and got decided I was going to be a special education teacher.
So, like, is this a pause button moment here? So, okay. All right. So you have like a dial phone like this.
No, it's crank.
Okay.
Crank
so,
phone.
Not a dial. That's
okay.
this.
Gotcha. So even before that. So. And your ringtone is Jimi Hendrix. You got to
Yeah.
be freaking
Yes.
shitting
Did you
me.
notice that? That's Voodoo Child by
that's-
Jimi Hendrix.
Exactly. So you have a voodoo Hendrix.
You
Okay,
should
great.
actually answer to Dylan and tell him you're on the
So
cat
this is a
podcast.
pause moment. Sorry, you're just like dropping all this stuff. Where I'm like, this can't be like this is your life, and you're not 30. So you.
How many people have Voodoo Child as a ringtone?
You and Hulk Hogan. That's it. I think that's the only two people. So you got crank phone to making music in the 60s, and you're hanging out and you're having a good time. In the meantime, you have some rock and roll bars, and then you decide like, well, I've done that, and now I'm going to be a professor.
Yep.
So special education, nonetheless.
In special ed, nonetheless, and you're the lead front singer, and you're not 30.
Right. So but interesting. See, the way I got in special education was I was looking for an area where I could get a job, and so I looked at what options were out there. Special education appeared to be the best opportunity to be get a job. So I went to summer school, took 15 credits in the summer,
Yeah.
which was a lot.
Yeah.
I got a job the following year on a temporary license.
Okay.
So in 1977, you got a temporary license in special education, you could be a teacher. Every year since 1977 that I started in this career, every year there's been a shortage of special education teachers.
Yeah.
You can get a license, a temporary license with less than a full degree, because we can't keep enough people in the field.
Yeah.
It's great work, but it's hard work.
My mom got, she finished high school in 1979, and she got her first and only job at the Dixon Developmental Center in Dixon, Illinois, working with, special ed, which is what they called it back then, patients, residents, clients, and she worked in that field, until she retired 40 years later,
Right.
and from high school to retirement.
I'm sure she enjoyed her career.
It was challenging,
Yeah, oh, yes.
but very thrilling, and
Important work. Not easy work, but important work.
no, and you're not paid the best. And so I grew up going to my mom's work, and that meant that she managed a home 44, I think it was, in Waukegan, Illinois. And if I went to work with my mom, it meant there was probably a dozen or 24 residents somewhere between these connected homes of adults that were 18 to however, to 90 or 100 that had special needs. And so my whole life growing up, that's what I did. So it was very common and like normal for me to go there and, see folks doing this work.
That background has probably helped you a great deal in your career today.
It's helped me to be a more patient parent, for sure, and many other things. But so I try not to have the same hang-ups with, folks with disabilities or special needs, or I guess it's more about feeling comfortable with yourself and not having it be awkward or, making you feel weird, because it's part of we're all here at the same time. And that's how my mom worked for 40 years in this, in this field. So it was very normal for me, but then seeing other people be in those kind, like those kinds of situations, it's so foreign to them because it's back then when you did it, they kind of put people over here, and they weren't really integrated in our societies like they are now. It was like, okay, go over to that corner. And so since then, I've seen this mass integration of this is what it looks like. And like in like late 70s, did you feel like that society had the tolerance and the capability and understanding to have that integration for special ed?
We didn't view it the same way. I think the society was the same.
Yeah.
We just didn't. We hadn't reached a point where we visioned that being an appropriate thing to do for children at the time. I think we over-identify kids with special education needs in a big way today. Mm-hmm. I think that's been building over many, many, many years. I think one thing that is important, gentlemen, is that I truly believe in my heart of hearts, I know this, I don't believe it, I know this for a fact, lots of kids with disabilities are only disabled when it comes to the education system. They are successful in life, incredibly successful in life.
Yep.
I could give you numerous stories about people who've become incredibly successful human beings while not successful in the high school and the public school experience.
Yeah, I mean, there's one right next to you.
You and I talked about this in the boat.
Yeah.
And that's how we met basically, is musky fishing. And I told you that story where I had an educator tell me one time that if you would have come through now as a kid, you would have been told to be medicated.
Right.
And it's because I didn't want to sit and do something that I found dumb for a long period of time, and I just didn't have the attention span. I didn't want to do that. Where now all of a sudden you put me in front of something that I really enjoy, I will do it for 8 hours without question,
100%.
and I'm super into it.
So many people have that story. I was thrown out of every extracurricular activity I was ever in high school. I was thrown out of French club. I was thrown out of vocal music. I was thrown out of marching band. Who do you know that's been thrown out of French club? Think about it.
Well, like, don't you go there for the girls? I don't know.
That's why I took French class.
It's like, I think girls like French. I'm going to take that.
Yeah. Yeah, there were more girls in French class than there were in Spanish, so that's why I did French.
See, that's for Spanish.
Right. It's like, no, to your point, I think you're right.
I was just in Cabo. So
Yeah.
Yeah. So, footnote or side note, he caught a giant 200-pound marlin, which is beautiful.
Giant.
And if we can, what's that?
Yeah, that's a giant. That's a big one.
It's a big. It's
striped marlin.
Striped marlin.
Big
excuse me, striped marlin.
Yes.
And we should put that on the podcast and get it on. And if you'll share that picture with us,
We'll put that on the
we
cover.
can
We'll put it on the cover.
probably
do it,
post it. And I think Tony can do that. He's super
Tony
smart.
knows what he's doing.
Tony.
We'll put that up.
But
right
no,
right about now.
Yeah, now, right? Okay. So, just a quick pause. Big shout out to Bolton Menk. Real people, real solutions, real big coffee cups. So, thank you,
having us
Bolton Menk,
back
for
again.
hosting us. This is the third one, so thank you. And a big shout out as well to Pelican Coolers, who is never going to see this show, but we have one right here. It's 14 quarts. It's cool. It holds beer. We like it. Sponsor us, Pelican. Thank you.
That's a beauty, by the way.
It's a nice
This
piano.
cooler
Yeah.
is
We
really
were going
neat.
through it. That's pretty impressive. Bear proof.
It's bear proof and has a
Bear
lock.
proof,
So,
folks.
to your point, this system that we have to educate kids, and you have a kind of it's your career. I mean, after owning the
The bars and
bars and the rock and roll and all that stuff and the PhDs,
Hall of Fame.
Hall of Fame, you get this front seat view for 40 years, give or take,
Give or take.
of seeing how this thing evolves. And are we winning? Are we winning the battle? Are we getting better?
No.
Okay.
Education is failing.
Okay.
And how is it failing?
Oh, guys, it's not because of the teachers. The teachers people become teachers, don't become teachers to get rich. Mm-hmm. Teachers are working extraordinarily hard, but it just ain't happening. It's not happening for lots and lots of kids. Kids of color are really struggling in the school systems.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of evaluations of major school systems, and their programming, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I won't get into too much of that, but I'll tell you that the dropout rates in all of our major cities are astronomical,
Yep.
Minnesota included.
Yep.
The graduation rate of kids of color in Minnesota schools are inappropriate. They're far too low. But it isn't just education; it's also society.
Yeah.
It's a much more complex. Education in and of itself cannot solve this problem. Society has to look at itself and decide how much it values education. And you just can't tell kids that they need to go to school because it's good for them. Kids have to believe that school is the answer.
Yeah.
And large numbers of kids do not believe that's the case.
Well, I had this conversation today with this gal. She is from Vancouver, British Columbia. And it was a very interesting conversation because she makes all her money through the internet and doing internet business. Okay, so she has people that she coaches and stuff, and the reason we're working together is because I understand more of what she's trying to accomplish because the world is changing. And she and I were talking about that. You go to school, you're not taught financial concepts, you're not taught certain things. And for some of the point of me saying this is, do you think that because the world is changing so much, the whole, like Wade, your mom, you go to a job day one out of high school and then work there for 40 years and you retire, those days are over, if not completely over. So is the education system not keeping up with the way that the world is changing, with the way that jobs change, with the gig economy? How is that failing?
Well, I think the curriculum is a mess. We have lots of things that I think are, I'm not saying they're not important, but we have other things that may be more important. The last book I did was on transition assessment, and you've seen the cover of it at any rate. It takes the approach that when talking, and transition is the education of kids from beginning of high school, making a plan to help them be successful after high school. So it's the connection of all of their high school experience through post-high school.
Yeah.
And the whole idea, which would be great for everybody if we had a plan, wouldn't it?
Yep.
Be fantastic. But special education kids are supposed to have that, and they do. Some are better than others, of course. But the idea behind that is that we ask children, what do you want to be? And then we help you get there. Wouldn't that be a wonderful concept? Individualized education ought to happen for everybody, just not kids with special education needs. But if we had that, and we could help kids, they're going to change from the time they're 14. They're going to change to the time they're 22 or 25 or 27.
Yeah.
But if you engage them in appreciating their education because they believed that their education was designed for them and not for the convenience of everyone else, I think we'd have a lot more excitement about going to school.
And like
For
you and
sure.
I talked about, where the system is created for everyone to fit in a box.
Right. And if you don't fit in the box, you're in trouble.
You're in trouble,
I.e.,
yeah.
you were in trouble.
Yep.
And I was thrown out of every extracurricular
Including
activity I
French
was in.
class. Or
See,
no,
for me,
French club.
and I grew up poor, and I'm a white minority where I grew up in Waukegan, Illinois. And so for me, it was all fear-based. I was like, I have to do this to move on or live someplace else or go to college or be a lawyer or be a doctor or something. So it wasn't so much that there wasn't a system for me. I just thought, this is the only system that I know of. I'm totally aware of this, and I got to get the hell out of here.
Well, fear's a motivator.
It's a huge motivator. And you go like, oh my God, I don't want to live in the apartment buildings I walk by every day, or, not worry if I have a job or not, or if I'm going to have some type of upward mobility and have some sustainability as a person.
Yep.
So being like, I'll be 40 in April, and I think I can already tell this isn't working. I have 2 kids, and Miles and Lincoln. You have, you have like 19 kids.
18.
Probably like
More on the way.
Yeah,
he
no,
has like 16 kids with 4 more on the way. So
it's too much information if we share anymore.
But you can tell even just in the small amount of time that my kids are young, like 4th and 6th grade. I can already see that we have a system that is based on the industrial complex model of the reason why you guys are in school together is because you're all 11.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You guys are a carton of eggs.
Nobody cares.
Nobody gives a,
Nobody cares if your skill set is different.
No.
Nobody cares if you're age inappropriate for the
Right.
a bunch of 11-year-olds.
Right.
Nobody cares.
So, like,
it's sad.
it's not
and
a
by
new
the
thing,
way,
right?
if you're unsuccessful, we're going to pass you on anyway.
Well, like my favorite comic, George Carlin, says, if the kid can't pass the test, then we just lower the test. And eventually, all you need to get into college is an effing pencil.
That's right.
Here's a pencil. Get in there. It's physics. Good luck. And I've seen that kind of play out. And he's been dead for 12, 13 years, and he made that joke almost 20 years ago. And we're 20 years in the future. And so we haven't changed anything
Oh, we've gotten considerably worse.
worse, right?
Now we're talking about doing away with ACT tests and SAT tests, and what we're going to use to decide who is going to be successful in college is I don't know what it is.
So have you seen the numbers and the stats about how much easier the ACTs or SATs are now
No, I haven't.
than they were from 20 years ago?
Well, I'm sure they're easier.
So basically, like if you got a 27 on the ACTs 20 years ago, now that'd be like getting a 34.
Yeah.
Really?
So I'm
Because-
smarter than I think I am.
Well, like I'm not in the Hall of Fame of anything. So, I mean, I'm a, hey man,
But let me say this, where we're going is 100% the truth. However, I believe that all kids should have the right to try.
Absolutely.
And sometimes they fool us with what they can do that we don't know they can do. I'll give you a story.
Yeah. So what do you mean by that? They fool us.
I had a young man in a special education classroom. He started off in a separate school because people perceived him to be considerably disabled.
Right.
Got to the public school, was in a self-contained classroom, meaning he got in Iowa, what that meant was you spent less than 50% of your time in the general education classroom. Now, he wanted to go to a university and major in business. Now, we were pretty sure that with his reading skills that he couldn't accomplish this. So we suggested that he go to this program that we're starting at a community college. It was a technical program, and he majored in business there. And we were starting a new program for kids in a 13th year of 13th year of school,
Okay.
an additional year of high school to help them acclimate to the higher education system. It was a great idea and a great. It's called Project Vital. It's in Grantwood Area Education Agency in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. But he went to, he participated in the school. Now, this kid was really highly motivated. So we didn't want him to go to the university because we didn't think he could be, nobody thought he could be successful. So he goes to the technical college. He gets his books a semester ahead of time, listens to the entire book before he goes to his class, in every one of his classes.
Yeah.
Works like crazy to be successful. 3 years later, he graduates from his technical program, goes to the University of Iowa, graduates on a full-ride scholarship, overcoming his disability, goes on to have a remarkable career in business.
Isn't that cool?
That's a great story.
That's
And
so
that's the
cool.
point of the whole thing. You can't pigeonhole kids into what they can and cannot do. You provide them opportunities with feedback, realistic feedback about what you can and cannot do based on what you're doing, not what I think you can do, but what you are doing.
And motivation is a lot of the
Because
factor
the
there.
motivation, there's nothing more important for kids than self-motivation.
Yes.
You have to harness the natural motivation of children. And that's what is wrong with education. Because if everybody has to go in and take algebra, which for the love of God, I can't figure out why. And you can't get into college without 2 years of
Yeah.
that stuff.
Right.
And I still can't figure out why.
Yeah.
Why they're taking algebra, why not statistics or something that would be
Sure.
trigonometry, something that would have some utilitarian Sorry, math folks, I'm sure I'm really pissing you off, but
Right.
They don't listen.
but and I don't even think you necessarily need math at all if you're depending on what you want to be. If you can graduate without you don't have to go to college to make $250,000 a year.
No, you don't.
You don't have to go to college to make $250,000
Some of
a
the
year.
smartest people I know
Didn't
never
go to
went to
college.
college.
And some of the smartest people I know are resentful they had to go to college.
Yep.
It's true. Sorry. I don't know.
Now, I love education, so
Me too. Like, I'm not dogging it, but
don't
you know,
get me wrong, but that doesn't mean it's for everybody, and it doesn't mean everybody needs the same education.
So how do you get? And I agree with a lot of what you're saying. So now, how do you then segment these kids are into this and these kids are into this instead of everyone takes algebra and that's the benchmark?
Well, you need a vocational component as well as
Yeah.
an academic component.
Yep.
And you need to have kids choose which one they want to be, and you have to value vocational education.
Yeah.
i.e., do you want to, Johnny, you could go to college for 4 years and try to be a math teacher or a history teacher, or you could go to 2 years college and become an electrician. Here's what you make, here's how you get it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But those options have to be available. Our curriculum has become narrower and narrower as the scope of kids that we are working with becomes broader and broader and broader.
And more complex.
And more complex.
Because the world becomes more complex.
Yes.
There are more opportunities for stuff to do.
But I've been talking about this for 40 years, so
if
nobody's paid attention to me till now.
Well, they're now that because of the 26 people that are going to listen to this, it's going to change the world.
But no, I mean, I think you have your parents, and I think you're, like your grandmother. What was the message to you that you can recall as a kid in grade school or junior high about education?
This is a great story. You'll love this. The only reason I went to college is because I had polio.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah.
I had polio. And I spent time in an iron lung and had to learn to walk all over again. So I missed kindergarten. I think that's a part of my problem, really. So I had to learn to walk again, and my parents felt I wouldn't be strong enough to be a farmer. So they thought, they said, what are we going to do with the boy? He can't be a farmer, which was, of course, the greatest job in the entire world.
As I look at it now, it may still be, actually.
At least according to the family.
Right.
Did you say it was a dirt farm that
Yeah.
that was kind of a
It was
dairy farm?
It was.
Yeah.
We pretended we were a dairy farm. We were actually a dirt farm. My folks were hardworking, kind of. They really valued farming. They wanted us all to be farmers, but they thought I was too weak, physically weak, to be a farmer. So they decided that I'd have to go to college. Nobody had any idea what that meant, but they were going to have me go to college. So they bought me a set of encyclopedias, and they said, read these.
Okay, so which one?
Put the headphones on.
World,
There were no headphones. You read it all.
So was it World Book or Britannica? Which one was it? Was it some we haven't heard of?
I think it was World Book, but I don't know. Hell, I'm not sure. But I literally spent my youth not only doing outside chores, but reading encyclopedias. So I can tell you how many Athenians died in the Battle of Marathon in 494 BC, if you'd like to know that.
So, but your parents were like, all right, well, Bob got polio and he probably can't carry the load physically.
Right.
So he needs to go upstairs
He needs to go to college.
and work on his mind.
But nobody knew what that meant.
So, but that's what I mean. Like, so did they tell you, like, Bob, go to college? Or
Yes.
so then you have this, and this is like the early 60s,
Yeah.
and you're working on this. You're like, all right, so I'm on the dirt farm, and I know that at the end of this road, after I got kicked out of all the clubs and French club, like, I'm going to go to school.
Yes, I was incredibly immature for my age, which wasn't working at all at 18, but at 70, it's going great.
Yeah. Any 40-year-old guy with all red shoes is not mature enough for his age. I don't care whatever D is after your
The older
name.
you get, the better it gets. So.
You know what I mean?
Dylan doesn't take after you at all, does he?
Dylan and I are exactly the same person.
So for you, I'm curious just to see the perspective of, I think, I'm 39, you're 34,
34.
35, 34,
Yep.
and you're
70.
70.
Yeah.
He was going to say. So
I thought you'd probably think I was about 62.
no, just from what you told me earlier, I was born and
When you did
like,
the whole like threw your hair back a little bit,
Yeah.
I thought, God, that guy's got to
and
be
besides,
in
you
his
have like the greatest set of hair of anybody in the room, and like he's wearing a hat. So,
Included.
but I'm guessing yours is 70. You're solid.
60s. Yep.
So, what did your parents tell you? And there's a point for the question. What did your parents tell you? Like, do what you want, do what makes you happy, or you're going to school, man.
You're going to college.
You're going to
'cause
college.
That's what you do.
They said you're going to college. They didn't say, and they gave me $100.
Right.
Go to college.
Okay.
And encyclopedias.
Yes.
So your son, who's 27, you have kids, I have kids. So here's the question. What will you tell your kids when it comes down to it? Will you tell your kids and grandkids? What do you tell them? You got to go to college. What are you going to say?
Well, I think it just it depends on the kid.
Right?
Like, I look at Owen, who's 8, and all he wants to do is fish. That is it. I mean, that's all he wants to do. And my wife and I were talking, and she's like, well, do you really want to push that so hard? And I said, you can get a full ride college scholarship to go fish in college. You can win a national championship in fish in college. Like, so it's not necessarily bad. But you know what? The other thing, I had a client who had me meet with their their son, and they're like, oh, I don't know what I want to do, whatever, back and forth. And I'm like, have you ever thought of just like doing vocational stuff? And
Yeah.
they're like, well, why would I do that? I've never heard of that. I don't know anything about that. And I said, well, look, you can go be an electrician. You can go ahead. You can have a trade. You can have a great life doing that. And they ended up, that's exactly what they did. So to me, it's just, I'm not going to tell my kid, you have to go to college. To answer your question, I'm not going to say, you pick which of these 3 colleges and that's what you're doing. I don't
You're going to
think that's the thing.
UMD.
Well,
All right,
I
fine.
kind of will say that a little bit, but not seriously.
But, so like for me, that was like a way out. And then I think back to like my friend Andy Maluski, who's a Polak from North Chicago. He's a fireman. Mm-hmm. His dad was a fireman, right?
Super.
So we're in school in like the mid 90s, early 90s. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go to this place and that school. And he's like, I'm going to be a fireman. And we dogged this guy. We gave him crap and teased him. So dig this. While we're going into debt
Yep.
after high school,
Making a lot of money.
guess what Andy did?
Yeah.
Andy went to fireman school for 2 years.
Yep.
And Andy started putting money away in his retirement account at 20.
Yeah.
20 years old.
And he's going to retire 10 years before you with a pension.
I finished law school. I reconnect with Andy and I say, hey, Andy, what you doing, man? And he's like assistant fire chief or something like that,
Yeah.
right?
And when's he retiring?
Like 56.
It's coming up.
Yeah.
It's coming up really soon. So I'm
Yeah.
like, what are you doing, man? He's
20
like,
years, baby.
right, 20 years,
Yeah.
right. And I'm like, well, okay. He's like, well, I'm building a house. And I was like, oh, that's cool, man. Where you building the house? He's like, Palatine, Illinois. And I was like, oh, that's cool. How much is the house? And he told me the number. And I was like, how can you afford that? And he's like, well, I'm paying half of it with cash.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's right. You became a fireman 10 years ago and didn't go to law school or get a PhD. And you saved a bunch of money. And now I'm jealous of you.
Yeah.
And I'm pissed off. So
You can have a
It's
really
true.
good life doing that.
right. And he has a great life. He has a paid off truck and dogs and a wife and kids and has a great time. And he has no debt. He has
Yeah.
zero debt.
Yep.
You know, if the biggest advice I would have for anybody going to a college is major in something that's going to get you a career.
Like
Right.
history.
Yeah, that's why I decided to go into special education.
That's what my dad said. He's like,
Yeah.
you're going to major in what? I'm like, well, history.
And that's
He's
a
like,
hard one.
He's like,
He's like,
Are you
great,
sure you wanna
thank
do
you.
that?
Awesome.
But you're a self-made man. You went out and created your own opportunity.
History-
A lot of people would have trouble with that.
history and philosophy,
Yeah.
though. I mean, that's like,
Well, yeah.
you go straight to the top after that.
Which the philosophy is like,
Philosophy is the big one.
you go straight to the car lot, you just sell cars.
Yeah.
Like
But
that's-
if,
I mean,
if you get a degree in psychology, a BA in psychology is not worth much. Mm-hmm. Unless you want to go on and be a psychologist, it's going to take a PhD.
yep.
Sociology, that's not going to help you in anything specifically. There aren't any BA level sociologists roaming the world.
Mm-hmm.
Women's studies, I'm sure it's valuable, important stuff, but there aren't any jobs for women, BA level women's studies
Yeah.
majors. There are any number, art history. I could give you 20 of them that really don't lead to anything. It's a mistake for most kids. If
I think
you're going to
so,
go
too.
into debt, you need to have a career.
Yeah.
Yep.
I love history, but it's what I do on the side. I find ways to meet that interest of mine, which is what you do now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's you kind of feed both needs, one that makes money and one that you really enjoy to feed your soul. And hopefully, if you're really lucky, you can somewhat blend the two a little bit. Then you have a better chance at being happy with how you spend your time while you're alive.
Right.
My buddies, so like back to the point of our system doesn't work, we need to change it. This is not a novel or new concept in the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. It is in America, but I have buddies that were from Germany or
Europe's
from
been
Finland,
doing that forever.
right? And so I'm like, hey man, so what was your jam? He's like, well, basically we hit a certain age and we took a test, and if you did this, you went to that school. If you did this, you went to this other school. And so I went and became X. Like I knew I was going to go get a Ph.D. and do something, but I got buddies I grew up with. They were going to be electricians. Not because the test said so, but because it fit that person.
I like the idea as long as the kid gets to choose.
If you get to choose,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. As long as he gets to choose. I don't like the idea of being directed based on a test into one group or the other.
Yep.
And I would like to see, personally, a way to move back and forth across those. Because when you're 14, you may say, I want to be an electrician. When you're 18, you may say, no, I want to go to college, or vice versa. So you need a way to get back and forth. But we don't have any meaningful vocational education.
Well,
and
not
I've been
anymore.
talking about that for 40 years.
Since, like,
Well,
sorry,
I
go
was
ahead.
just gonna say maybe I think it's so much of a learning style thing.
It is, yeah.
Like I'm a visual learner. I gotta see it. It's got to be out. I gotta see it. Where my wife is absolutely the opposite. She read the book and took the test. I didn't read the book and I just showed up to class, took really good notes, took the test, and did fine. Especially if it was something I enjoyed.
Yeah.
So maybe it's something that way, but who
See,
knows?
I think that
I
at
feel that too.
the time that you were getting into it in like the late 70s, our vocational system was gutted. It started to fall apart. And so this 2-year program and it just kind of went by the wayside. So it's funny to me, if I want to have somebody come to my house as a plumber, electrician to fix a chimney in southern Minnesota, I have to wait a month and a half, 2 months.
Yes.
Yep.
So I'm like, do we have a shortage of plumbers, Tony?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do we have a shortage of electricians? Yeah, we do, because we didn't fill the pipeline.
Yep.
Because we haven't valued
We didn't.
that. We tell our kids that anybody who does that is not a winner.
You want to do that? I'm like,
Yeah.
this dude has a cabin and he makes over $100,000 a year. He has no debt. Do you know what it feels like to make $100,000 a year with no debt? Mm-hmm. It feels pretty awesome. Mm-hmm. Okay, well,
Yeah.
that's what I think happened.
I totally agree. I
Sorry,
totally agree.
and like, you have a PhD, I have a JD. He's probably one of like the most successful guys I know. He just kills it. Is that the path? I
It is for some people. but
Doesn't
not for
have to be,
others.
but not for everybody.
Doesn't have to be. Shouldn't have to be. And we shouldn't give kids the feeling that they aren't successful unless they have one of those 3 things.
Yep.
Right. And that's the part that I hate is, do we, like your example of the guy who's like, hey, I really want to do this. And
he did it.
you guys were like, I don't think you can do it, man. Or
Yeah,
we were
it
like, we had our
wasn't
doubts.
It wasn't because we didn't care about him. We were trying to protect him.
Right.
Yep.
And we were stupid.
Yeah.
And he goes and he gets the books and he listens to all of them and he finds a way to make it happen.
Yeah.
And all the PhDs and JDs and the rich people that have thoughts and ideas, he proved them all wrong.
Yeah.
All of them.
That's America right there.
That's it in
That's
a nutshell,
America.
right?
Yep.
So, and we look at what's happening at our schools at the grade school level, junior high, high school. And I want to just put a disclaimer in there. Being a teacher is a hard thing. Being a parent's a hard thing. And to do it well is near impossible. Be committed, get the job done. It's a tough thing to do. We have many obstacles in our way. But that doesn't mean we can't be critical of how education is shared and taught.
And have a conversation.
And then talk about it.
Yeah.
It's not like you're dogging teachers or like the university. And I teach at MSU now. I teach business law classes and have for 6 years. Can it be better? Yeah, it can be better.
When I was in education for 40 years, so I'll tell you right now, I can walk into the teacher's lounge of pretty much any school, and I can say, guys, who are the best 3 teachers in the building? A lot of consensus. Mostly everybody knows who the best 3 teachers are.
Yeah.
And I can say, hey guys, who are the worst 3 teachers in this building? Pretty much consensus. Everybody knows who the really bad teachers are. Mm-hmm. Everybody else is on a continuum between those 2 poles.
Yeah.
But the worst teachers, and we know who they are, make exactly the same amount as the best teachers. Mm-hmm. Therein lies a problem in education. There's no career ladder for good teachers. There's no way to tell good teachers you value them. Everybody makes the same money. We're killing ourselves with mediocrity.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So those comments have a word buzzing in my head, which is called tenure. And so there's been a call to criticize and to put the idea of tenure to the test. And should we have tenure? Should we not have tenure? Are we encouraging this outcome of mediocrity?
Tenure in the public school should be much harder to get than it is.
Yeah.
However, at the university, it's already hard to get tenure.
Okay.
And the purpose of tenure at the university is so we don't end up with people saying the same things over and over again.
Okay.
It's freedom of speech and freedom of thought. That's valuable.
Okay, so that's a good segue. One of the things that I think would be interesting to talk about from obviously being in education for as long as you were, what do you think from a on-campus freedom of speech, freedom of thought, has that broadened? Has it narrowed over time?
I think MSU, where I worked, is actually pretty good at allowing for, and I give them a tremendous amount of credit. Anybody from MSU, if you're listening to this, congratulations. I think you work at a place where freedom of thought is appreciated.
Yeah.
You agree?
Mm-hmm. I do.
However, I think if you look around the country, it's very scary what is going on in a lot of places in higher education. Mm-hmm. The intolerance of disparate ideas is awful. Mm-hmm. And if you don't fit into the system that they're talking about, you're really shunned. Possibly won't get tenure. Possibly you're going to find yourself on the outs. And that should never be what higher education is like.
Yeah.
Higher education is about freedom of thought. The most important diversity in higher education is diversity of thought. Mm-hmm. The capacity to talk about, kids need to hear different people talking differently so they can make their own decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that when you're talking about the direction, or you're worried about that direction, so is that a West Coast thing, East Coast thing? Is it I mean, what, like, how is that happening? Is it just an echo chamber that people like to hear the same things, and so that's who's getting hired? Is it on purpose? Is it like how is that outcome happening?
Well, there are numerous things, I think. Let me give you an example. Mm-hmm. I'll give you an example. In the East Coast somewhere at a major university, I don't remember which one, during the political events that were in the 2016 election, I think, mm-hmm. people were writing on chalk on the sidewalk, "Vote for Trump." Emotionally, people were very upset, very afraid, didn't feel it was a safe environment because somebody had written "Vote for Trump" on a sidewalk.
Yeah.
Those people need to be ignored. And maybe they don't need to go to a safe place. They need to go to class and hear other people talk
Right.
about diverse thinking.
I agree. We talked about it, I think, yesterday in like our pre-podcast meeting. Do you have the ability to be open and hear different ideas.
And I think it's less and less and less, right?
And I don't think we do right now. And like we're talking about this at, 4 o'clock yesterday, and people are storming the Capitol. And like I told Matt, I was like, man, so like I love comedy and I love, like you guys love history and I get that. And it's a great thing. I think our modern historians happen to be our best comedians. And maybe they were, 500 years ago, or maybe for all time, like our comedians were the best historians, period. Lenny Bruce cuts his teeth, back when, pretty much in a campus environment at a college at Berkeley.
Which was the center of free speech in 1968.
That was the whole point,
Yes.
right? And so, you're singing, making music, and then we fast forward in your lifetime when you're 70, and now people like Lenny Bruce, Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, no offense to anybody, Louis C.K., Bill Burr, they will not book shows at colleges. This is where you are supposed to learn how to effing think at a school. And now we can't. And so for me, it was the craziest thing to go, how do we get here so fast? Mm-hmm. Because Lenny Bruce breaks ground and changes how we interpret media on our lives and how we talk to each other through Richard Pryor and George Carlin. And now Bill Maher gets disinvited to do a commencement speech a few years ago because Bill Maher, right?
Unbelievable.
Like, are you freaking kidding me? So right now, it's like, well, I don't know. Are we going there to teach people how to think, or are we going there to teach people to get in line and repeat what this message is? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what it seems like is happening.
I think it's very hard in the modern university in a lot of places to think differently. You are shunned. You are an outcast if you think outside the box of identity politics.
Yeah.
And identity politics are a horrible thing. Mm-hmm. Diversity is a wonderful thing. Diversity of thought is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. Because skin tone doesn't matter a bit.
Correct. Yeah. And the ability
to
be able to express it. Yeah. Correct. The ability for you to be able to express the diversity of thought.
Right. Safely and feel. Of all places in the world, the university should be the place where diversity of thought is appreciated, mm-hmm. and where adults mm-hmm. can present different ideas, mm-hmm. And where young adults get to hear those ideas and make their own decisions.
Choose for themselves.
Yeah, and apply their trade and kind of figure it out and see where they're going to stand.
Right.
And this podcast is happening the day after we had people storm the Capitol in D.C. So for me anyway, there's kind of this veil that is in the back of my mind. I'm thinking about it.
Yep.
Like I'm thinking about the guy sitting in Pelosi's office with his feet on the desk. And I'm thinking about the guy sitting in the chair of the speaker. And I didn't expect I would see that in my lifetime. But it was a watershed moment for America anyway, mm-hmm. where you're thinking, I didn't think I'd ever see this happen in America. I've seen it on the news.
I've seen it.
Right. And so
I've seen it.
You have.
1968.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's not that long ago. And now we see it again. It's the first time I've seen it.
The only reason I didn't flunk out of college was because Nixon invaded Cambodia and they closed down the universities without us taking finals.
Right.
The only reason I didn't flunk out.
So it just happened so quickly. And I think if people, and I'm not trying to pick one side or the other because I don't do that because it just seems, it's a fool's errand to do that. Mm-hmm. But it seems like everybody, to your point earlier with the echo chamber, we all hear the same crap from the same sources, and it feeds into what we already hope we believe or think we believe.
And look at what social media algorithms are made to give you more of what you've already heard and seen.
It's specific, to you, and you're like, oh, they're speaking to me. No, they're tracking you, dude.
Yeah. Yep. They're tracking everything that you look up, see, watch. All of that, all those algorithms are made to show you more, not diversity of thought, but to show you more of what you've already seen and watched before.
They're like, oh, you think this?
Therefore,
Yeah, here's some more stuff.
Yep.
Here you go.
Yep.
So where do we go? Like, is there a way to swing it back, right? Because you have, like Sir Ken Robinson's a, recently deceased kind of expert, like British author, professor, very passionate about education. He has TED Talks out there, and he talks about why the education system is failing. And before we got on like the podcast, I made a reference to, like Toto and pulling back the curtain, right?
Yes, I remember.
Okay. So
You were listening. Nice job.
what I think happened now, and then I'll shut up after this. I think our education system is the opposite of when the Wizard of Oz goes from black and white to color.
Ah, well put.
I think our kids live in a really colorful Technicolor world, because my kid's got this iPad and he's got all this stuff and he's really being interactive. And then he goes to a school system that probably would feel like black and white. And then he just tunes out.
I think that's
I mean, you think is that a portion of it?
sounds right. I think because if one size has to fit all, then you're losing. If you teach to the center, you're losing everybody on the tails.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
The good and the
good and the bad,
the smart
the
and the not so
and
smart.
the not so smart,
Yep.
those that are going to be extraordinarily successful and those that need more help, they're all going away. The
Yeah.
kids that are going to be there are the ones who are compliant and average.
Yes.
So it's
That are quiet, sit down,
Yeah.
do your
Yeah.
work, and
yeah,
go home.
and that's not good.
No.
That's not good.
So then how do you manufacture the confidence to have people be open to speaking out? They speak out without using a vacuum. And what I mean by vacuum is, you have like these keyboard warriors or keyboard cowboys that are really tough in front of their computer, but they can't write an article. They can't express themselves freely. They can't go speak in front of a crowd or at the dinner table without it being somewhat inflammatory. So how do we get that back? Because I think I'm 40 and I'm trying to do my thing, but I have kids and I want to get them in a spot where they're okay with dissent. I've read some of the best opinions and they were the dissenting opinion, which means they lost. But it was the best written portion.
Usually is in a lot of court cases. That's what you see. The dissent is usually the stronger written opinion.
So how do we get back there? Some of my favorite opinions are written by Scalia, and don't read into that. I don't agree with his politics or his policies when he was living, but his dissents, I really like them. How do we get that to
Remarkable writer.
one of the best, right? I mean,
Yeah.
give it up. He was one of the best writers ever on the court,
Yep.
even if he had Ted Cruz as a clerk. That's it. That's
Yep.
okay. So how do we get your kids and my kids and your kids and grandkids and our future grandkids, how do we get them to stop being afraid and to share what they actually frickin' think?
I think one of the things we have to do is understand that right now public education can't solve all our problems. We aren't there, and we're not going to be there as near as I can see. And I think teachers' unions are out of control. So, and that's tragic, by the way, because I was a union member. I'd like to think that they were, but I think it's somewhat of a problem. I think we need charter schools.
Yeah.
I think we need private schools. I think the student ought to carry the tuition with them
Wherever they go.
wherever they go. Because what we need is more diversity in how we deliver education, more diversity in how we think about education, more diversity in how we deliver education. All of the above.
So how do we do that? I mean, which is, I know it's a super loaded, broad, really kind of crappy question, but if you look at what we spend per pupil compared to the other top 20 nations,
It's awful.
which, by the way, we're not the only country in the world that has freedom in education. I think we advertise it the most, but we're not the only one. We spend more money on our kids than the other major nations in the world, and they get better results.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at what we spend inside the United States, I think Baltimore is right at near the top about with how much
Yeah.
they spend per pupil.
Yep.
And their outcomes are awful. Most major urban areas, their school systems are awful, and it's a complex problem. We've talked about that, but we don't need more of the same. We need more different things, and that I think is a clear answer. We just talked about it.
So how do you have the courage to bring that up?
I don't know.
As the person that's, let's say you're a teacher and you have diversity of thought, of ideas, of implementation. You go to like you talked about the teachers union. I don't know much about the teachers union, but I'm guessing they want to keep more of the same. Is that a fair assessment or not?
Well, I think that unions are wonderful things if done well, but unions an education union needs to for sure be incredibly worried about the education of kids, as well as their own economic reimbursement and lifestyle. And I think that education unions are, not all, but I think I've heard of many that aren't doing a good job of that. Let me give you an example. I think Chicago schools just went back to work.
They did.
And
Yep.
half of teachers didn't show up because
Right.
they were afraid.
Right.
Well, my thought would be you need to fire that half of the group.
And then we'll figure it out after
And then
that.
we'll figure it out after that.
Yeah.
But if we continually coddle people who won't do their jobs, we've got a problem. We won't solve any of our problems.
Yeah.
You'll have more of that behavior, not less.
Yes.
You know what? I'm a member of the union that represents MSU. It's like the IFO or something
was
like
too.
that, right? So I think I'll say I am pro-union in the idea that has great intentions and should
Right.
protect people and collective bargaining rights and all this other stuff that we all know why unions are good.
All right.
Or the same reasons why people hate unions and they're garbage, right? Like the UAW. Like go Google, if you like just look that up, people hate that. But I don't trust like a mass of people. Individuals, I'll trust an individual. But as soon as I see like 500 people, I'm like, oh boy, there's some stupid shit about to happen now.
The problem at the university, though, is that we're all about supporting the weakest link. And I'm not interested in supporting the weakest link. I don't want the weakest university professor there.
Yeah.
I want somebody who can't do his job well to be gone so we can hire somebody who can do their job well.
Yeah.
Most of the people at MSU are very good, very talented, work extraordinarily hard. They're very, very good at their jobs. But you know there are people that aren't. And we, as a what's the word? A collective, I'm not pulling it up. It's something anyway, we need to monitor our own, and we need to participate in getting rid of those that don't pull their weight, because that's why we should be a good union.
I think that's the point, to have that. I think right now we've come to the lowest common denominator.
Yep.
And then we kind of like defend certain standards, even though the overall goal, while well stated and intentioned, actually isn't being advanced.
Yep.
And so
You can't do that by
can't.
definition. By solving for the lowest common
You
denominator,
can't do it.
It's by definition. It's
so it's hard.
bidirectional.
I think it's
know-
impossible if you try to save the weakest link and protect them as well as you do
Yeah.
those that aren't the weakest link, you're making everyone weaker.
And you're making the students weaker.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
Well, we have devalued this 4-year degree in my lifetime for sure, to where it's like, this is now like a high school diploma or a GED. I've heard people make these hyperbolic statements, right? I'm like, really? Is that true? Like a 4-year degree is not like, you have to have that to be a greeter at, like a big box store. But then if you look at the numbers, some of that's true, man. Like, you go, what's up? And you're like, well, I couldn't find a job. So like, what are you doing now? And you're saying, welcome to Costco. I love you. So is that actually happening? It seems like it is. And this big middle you're talking about, like the top end, the bottom end, that big middle is getting huge. It's massive.
Because you're being taught to be in the middle and just,
Yeah.
sit down, shut up, do your work, go home.
You're not only being taught, you're also being pushed by society to be alike.
To be mediocre.
This whole thing about free speech and hate speech and speech and freedom of thought all lend it to push people toward one gigantic middle. And it's not good.
I know the whole First Amendment is the most important one. That's why it's number one. And we have the Second Amendment, just in case the First Amendment doesn't work. And that's my belief. I don't, went to law school. I'm a lawyer and I studied this stuff quite a bit. I love free speech. I'm a huge supporter of it. It's the most important thing. I don't think you should be able to yell fire in a theater. But if you want to tell somebody to go F off in a public square, we need to preserve that.
We do.
Sorry if you don't like, the example, or it's offensive, or people get, upset about things, or this whole cancel culture idea of things. It's okay to tell somebody to go F off, or if you suck, or you're great, or everything in between. The whole point is, this is where we try to perfect saying what we want to say and then getting on with our day.
Here's the most important single thing about universities. If their policy is acts of intolerance will not be tolerated,
Right.
we've ruined the university.
Right.
There is no university.
I don't know. It's like the emperor's new clothes. I keep thinking about it. Is anybody going to tell this guy he's naked? Like,
Apparently not.
apparently not, right? You just
That
walk.
leads into another conversation.
Right, you just walk your naked ass down the street. And so we have this range of ideas. And so, which is funny, because this is why we wanted to do the podcast and to have these conversations that we really wanted to have, probably would have anyway, and to get people that have the courage and the confidence to actually put it on wax, And I hope that it moves the needle and we can do something with it.
Well, to me, this is exactly what I wanted this to be like, because you and I have talked a lot. We even tell the story, but you and I spent an entire week in Lake of the Woods with no cell service right next to each other.
Yeah, how much time we got left, Tony? Okay. So can you please tell me how this unlikely pairing happened?
Okay.
Like, can we just a total left turn?
So pre-pandemic, we would go to the Y. You'd play, what's that called, racquetball with your
Racquetball,
buddies.
yeah.
Okay. So we're in the locker room, and all of a sudden I can hear behind me, all these guys are talking about, nice job, Bob, on the second set and that whatever.
Look at this guy's leg.
Yeah. and then,
It's a beauty.
it was beauty. And then I hear this guy who's like, well, Red's over there. He's crazy enough. He's going fishing muskies in the snow and all that. And I perk up. I hear muskies because I'm a huge, for those of you who don't know, which there's nobody who knows me that doesn't know this, but I'm a significant muskie fan. And so I just started talking with you. And then we went to Lake of the Woods for a week together. We were in a 20 and a half foot boat for 6 days in a row with no cell service. And
Damn few fish.
damn fish, we sucked. We were of the three groups. We were the worst fishermen that week, but damn, we had a good time. We laughed a lot. We had a lot.
I had a
of fun.
lot of theories that we talked about.
And yes, not all of them are on the podcast, but that's we had a great time. So that's how we met, and now he lives up in Minnetonka, and so we spent this fall fishing a few times together, and again
wonderful.
didn't catch a fish because we're fairly bad at it. But
Apparently we suck. But
yeah, that's how we know each other. So we have a significant muskie addiction. Both he and his boys and myself, we all have a big. He actually, cool thing is that you had talked about Jason Hamernick earlier.
Yes.
I don't remember if that was before or on the show. But you got to hold. What was it? A 56 by 20?
56 by 27.
So for those people that don't know out there, that is an absolute mammoth
Monster.
giant. That's
Yeah.
a 50-pound muskie. That is
That's
like
a world-class fish.
that's a world-class fish. I mean, that is unbelievable. And you netted that fish.
I netted it. Alec took the picture of it, the famous picture of it, and Dylan held it with Jason. So all of us got involved with that fish one way or another.
Yeah.
It's a great story.
Yeah. So that's where he and I have a significant passion towards that. So you can imagine all like the history talk that and this
Yeah.
is these are the conversations we have in the boat as
And
we're
basically,
not
like,
catching
you
fish.
have two nerds hanging out, trying to catch giant fish.
Yeah.
You catch like one fish every 10 times.
Yep.
And so you guys are, and by the way, I don't musky fish. I would, I don't, but I know that if you're into musky, you're either in or you're not.
Yeah, there's no in
There's like,
No.
you're either like addicted to this
Yep.
like elusive fish, or you really need time alone, maybe both. And you go and you try.
Yeah.
So you guys met at the Y on a whim, and so you planned a trip together.
Yeah, we started fishing.
or did
Yeah, we
you-
started fishing together. You had some friends that were going on a trip, and you had a spot in the boat. And
Yep.
so you just like, hey, I think you said, hey, partner, because that's usually what it was. Hey, partner, you want to go? I got a spot for you. And I talked to Lisa, and she was okay with it. And we got to meet an awesome couple of people that we didn't know before. And we got to have a cigar and I think a whiskey out on a deck up on Long Lake. And
Good stuff.
God, that was good.
Yeah.
That was a great night.
Yeah,
Yep.
great stuff.
So Bob, I know you're in Minnetonka or like that area, and it's a drive from there to here, but will you come back
Oh, sure.
and do this again? Because I feel like we just kind of knocked the rust off the motor.
I'd love it. I'm.
Yeah.
This is. I think it's not only fun, but it's I think important to have for people to talk about issues like we're talking about diversity of thought. Mm-hmm. Boy, is that important. Education.
Mm-hmm.
We need to talk about that. So there's a lot of other things we can talk about, and I'm sure we'll have a great time.
And have a civil conversation.
Yeah.
You know?
And I'll.
But I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed our conversations from the Y all the way to today and in the boat and all that stuff. And I really appreciate you taking the time and coming down.
My pleasure.
And
guys.
next time we might need to have your wife come because she's also fun to talk to.
She's something.
Yeah,
she's really she's
great
exciting.
So we got a spot right here to my right, and I am thrilled and had so much fun meeting you, and I really mean that. I don't,
Thanks.
cameras or not, so thank you, and I
Thank you,
hope you come
gentlemen.
back, because I feel like we put about 20% in, and we could got it like 80% more to go, and we could do it. So I'm thankful and grateful again, and please come back, and actually maybe we can drink some of this beer
Oh,
next time.
fantastic.
Yeah,
I won't be here, but I know you two.
yeah, we'll bring it. So thank you, Bob.
All right, thank you, guys.
Thank you.